Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was in Washington recently asking for more support in Israel's war with Hamas. Now, to chat about this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert and host of the Foreign Desk, Lisa Daftari, who joins us once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, what were some of the takeaways from Netanyahu's speech to Congress on Wednesday?
I think he did a few things quite well. Look, it was a very difficult speech to give, right? We know where the world stands in terms of their, this information war about Israel, all the negative narratives that are out there about genocide, about apartheid, about colonization, and all the buzzwords that are flying around right now. We know 100 Democrats boycotted the talk, so this is all in advance. So for Bibi Netanyahu to walk in there, it's an uphill climb, but he did a few things quite well. And I thought the first thing he did very well was strike a balance between we're vulnerable, we got attacked. 1,200 people were brutally set on fire and raped and just mutilated in the worst ways. But also, we are tough, we are strong, we will win this battle. And I think that that was a very difficult balance to strike, but he did it quite well. Number two was to communicate this unity in that it's not just our fight, it's your fight too. It's not going to be just our victory, it'll be your victory too. And really hitting home the point that terrorists are not just after Israel, but first comes Israel, then comes the United States or the West in general. And I think that he drove that point home quite well. And lastly was to say, give us the arms and we'll do it quicker. And I think that that was the bottom line, and that was the message that he was trying to convey in a very compelling way, to say, we're very happy with the United States. He kept it very bipartisan. He said Joe Biden was a great Zionist and has helped him along the way. No complaints, but if you give us more, if you give it to us quicker, we'll take care of the job quicker. And he left it at that.
Now, there were protesters who were not happy that Netanyahu was in Washington. A number of them dumped maggots, mealworms, and crickets throughout the Watergate Hotel where he was staying.
Yeah, it was disgusting. I don't know if you got to see any of that footage, but it was absolutely disgusting. Right. So, we knew that the protests were coming. They've been going on for months now around the United States and Canada. I know you guys have your fair share of those protests as well, whether they're on college campuses or in the center square. They did this in front of, the very, important, the places of significance and symbolism in Washington, D.C., including in front of the train station there. They took down 2 American flags and put up Palestinian flags. They actually got together and burned an American flag. They were wearing Hamas gear, Hezbollah gear, and there's actually multiple Hamas flags there. This is not a pro-Palestinian protest. This is not something about land or policy. This is not against Bibi Netanyahu. This is absolutely pro-terrorism and anti-Americanism. When you burn an American flag, when you bring down 2 American flags on American soil in the capital of the United States. So it was very hard to watch this footage. Graffiti everywhere in very important, monuments and again squares and such in Washington D.C. A lot of desecration. All of it saying, "Watch out to the West. Hamas is coming." A lot of threats towards the United States.
Now, how many people were actually arrested, those who tore down the flags and burned them?
Yeah, we heard the spokesperson to the White House talking about this yesterday, and she doubled down on the fact that they are very much supportive of peaceful protesters, and it's free speech until it gets violent, and then the police will step in. A lot of this was violent, and a lot of this was, in fact, desecration of property, trespassing, doing a lot of those things, trying to get into the rotunda in Congress, trying to get into different representatives' offices, even. Talk about an insurrection, right? This was, in fact, completely out of control and out of hand. And I know that local police try to keep this at bay and try to kind of take a step back and pass it off as free speech. But you can't. You just cannot watch these people, burn American flags, tag all these monuments, threaten the police, get into their faces, and do nothing and really just chalk it up to freedom of speech. It's not that. It's not that at all. It's hate speech. It's violence, and it's meant to threaten. And what's threatening the United States in this way, in this political way, is terrorism. This is, in fact, terrorism. This is a national security issue. And I hope that law enforcement, whether it's in Los Angeles, where we saw them take a step back when Jewish a synagogue and some businesses were attacked a couple weeks ago on Sunday, or in this case, police have to step in much sooner to prevent a lot of this from happening.
Now, Lisa, you talked about the violence. U.S. Capitol Police used pepper spray on many of the anti-Israel protesters. The crowd allegedly failed to obey an order from police to move back from the police line, and that's when things really escalated.
Right. And it's as if they came there to escalate, right? Hal, we know this. The day before Benjamin Netanyahu got to town, I think we were saved by someone from above because it was pouring rain and only a handful of protesters came out in front of the hotel. But yesterday they came out in droves, and the police, the only, again, recourse they had, as you said, was to use pepper spray to at least disperse the crowd. Again, police have been very reluctant here in the United States to step forward in these protests for fear of escalation. And that, again, that's intimidation of the police. And when they will not back it down, well, then when they're actually beating up and punching police officers in the face, we saw a lot of that in New York, when they're taking down the American flag, when they're touching public property like that in a way that is just meant to destroy and send a message like that. There has to be a clear message that this is not tolerated. And until that is done, we're going to see more and more of these protests. They're going to be, shutting down the roads to the the airport, like we saw in New York and Los Angeles. They're going to be shutting down the roads to the hospital. We saw that here in Los Angeles again. So they're not going to back down until they realize that there will be consequences.
Let's talk a lot about Israel's battles right now, Lisa. I mean, they've been fighting a number of terrorist groups, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis, and of course Hezbollah in Lebanon. Now, speaking of Hezbollah, the militant group published new drone footage of an airbase near Haifa. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how much these terror groups have advanced in the last decade or so, using technologies to show off their capabilities and to threaten Israel and the rest of the world regarding their capabilities. Now, I want to talk a minute about Hezbollah and the threat that it is. So Hezbollah is the first child. It is the golden proxy of Iran's regime. They are the most well-endowed and well-funded and well-resourced in terms of military capability of the terror proxies. So they have about 150 to 200,000 missiles. That's short, medium, long-term, long-range missiles, as well as drones, as well as 30 to 50,000 trained fighters. These are all pointed towards Israel. And then Haifa, of course, being in northern Israel, being within easy shot for them. This is what they do. They send out these videos to threaten and to show their capability, a muscle flex. What's interesting about using video, Hal, is that the same videos were used by Hamas to show the pillage that they did on October 7th. The burning of families, the rapes, the women who had bloodied pants, and the world still can see this and say it didn't happen. This is by their own account. This is not something that was fabricated by AI, but the terror organizations themselves, audacious enough to record these incidences and then spread them as propaganda to say, this is who we are, we can do more of this. And then the world defends them. And then you have useful idiots on the streets of Washington, D.C., defending them and carrying their flag and burning the American flag in a salute to Hamas and Hezbollah. So it's a backwards, dangerous world we live in right now.
Okay, closer to home, Lisa, let's talk about Joe Biden dropping out of the presidential race as he handed the reins to Kamala Harris. Many of her supporters seem to believe that Harris stands a much better chance of beating Trump in November. But the DNC, however, has instructed Harris challengers to declare their candidacy by Saturday.
Right. So it's interesting. The Democrats find themselves in a very awkward position. On the one hand, they want to rally behind this momentum. And what is this momentum? Well, Kamala Harris had even a lower approval rating than Joe Biden did when he was in office, when he is in office, I should say. She's not likable. But with this change, because ever since the debate between Biden and Trump, they felt that morale was so low. They knew that Biden did not stand a chance to win because he's just not capable of serving anymore. They want to now be excited and say, well, she's young, she's a woman, we got Joe out of the way, and now maybe she can carry the torch. And it's not because of whom who she is. Yes, she's a woman. She's a woman of color, and she's young-ish for politics. So, they would like to rally behind her, but they're also rallying behind her because she's not Trump. The point of this election for Democrats is to prevent Trump from winning. And if they can, whomever it is, if it's Kamala, the reason why I think a lot of Democrats would like a different candidate, they would prefer a different candidate, and I think the polls did show that prior to Joe Biden stepping down, is because they have such little time and they will have a hard time raising funds. They will have a hard time rallying everyone around, getting the memo out, and getting someone else elected. Now, Kamala Harris became the de facto candidate without earning even one single vote by Democrats. And that is the issue, and that a lot of people are grappling with right now. So, will Democrats put up a new candidate altogether? Or will they try to fake it till they make it, so to speak, and try to ride the momentum that Kamala has brought in? A lot of women's groups, a lot of minority groups, a lot of young people are trying to get the word out to, in fact, vote for Kamala and to defeat Donald Trump.
What's interesting is Kamala Harris obviously has a lot of support in the United States with the Democrats, but she has a lot of support here in Canada as well because she went to high school in Montreal for 3 years. So there's that kind of that Canadian connection as well. But a lot of Canadians also would much rather see Donald Trump become the next president, even though many argue that both are protectionists. It's not really going to help Canada, especially when it comes to trade. But let's talk about Donald Trump and maybe some of his momentum since the assassination attempt. We've all seen the T-shirts and we've seen the images, fight on, fight with the blood dripping. Has he had a lot of momentum since the assassination attempt?
Quickly thereafter, he had a tremendous amount of momentum, and I saw a lot of influential Democrats come out and say, "Wow, we applaud him." Mike Zuckerberg, Matt Zuckerberg from Mark rather Zuckerberg from Facebook came out and said, "He's, he's a courageous man." He used different words that I won't share right now, but it's interesting to see him get that kind of street cred, so to speak, in the aftermath of the assassination attempt. But the media very quickly overturned that and took it away. And he had a lot of momentum from the RNC as well. I think a lot of Republicans and Democrats thought that he was more mild mannered than he has been. The assassination attempt did something to him, even though he is very brave and very strong, and he put his fist up and all of that. And there were others, women on The View, for example, on ABC, who said that the whole thing was fabricated and he's lying and he's kind of milking it and all of that. I mean, right. So there's the whole spectrum, right? Look, we said this 4 years ago, Hal, and we'll say it again. This will be an election for Donald Trump or against Donald Trump. And that is the persona that is Donald Trump. Either you love his policies, you get him and what he stands for. And we're seeing a lot of middle-class Americans actually get him. And, I was watching some of the NBC coverage, which is definitely not pro-Donald Trump, traditionally speaking, at the RNC, and they said something very interesting. They said the amount of times we're hearing food prices, gas prices, the average American worker, it's as if we're at the DNC, and that's a very interesting shift for the Republican Party. Now, what it's going to come down to, unfortunately, Hal, and it's so embarrassing to say this, because it would come down to the economy, the border, foreign policy. It will come down to abortion. And that is very sad and very misguided. And the reason is, and I'm not dismissing the importance of abortion as a topic, but I think that the Democrats know that that is a very sensitive subject for many people, and that is where they are not overlapping at all, especially with the selection of J.D. Vance as VP. He has a more hardline stance on abortion. I wish Americans would understand that it's going to come down to the states. That's how Donald Trump sees it. I hope that Kamala Harris sees it the same way, and that we can come up with a very nuanced, informed way to deal with abortion where it favors everyone and we can agree on it as Americans. That's really that's the upsetting thing, Hal, is because covering foreign policy, for example, you see all the crises in the world that affect national security for us here in the West. It affects Canada. It affects the United States. Look at immigration, for example. It affects our northern border with Canada. It affects our southern border with Mexico. So these are such important topics. And of course, inflation and the economy and jobs and all those other things that we want Americans to focus on, and vote for the candidate who best answers those questions for Americans. Instead, we're getting our information off of TikTok and off of influencers and off of Instagram, and these are not exactly, portrayed in the ways that these candidates would handle those matters.
Political correspondent and host of the Foreign Desk, Lisa Daftari, thanks again for joining us today from Los Angeles.
Thank you so much.